I'm managing this area about since 2005.
Dan Tran has seen this shopping strip at its worst.
Rundown business.
But right now,
This area is quite safe.
people in this plaza feel more secure.
I feel so comfortable being around here.
Dan manages the building and owns an accounting firm here as well. A few months ago,
They make appointment to meet me here.
Arlington Police Department came to talk about Operation Connect, a new program to reduce crime and improve relationships. Dan says it's not just talk. He's really seen the change.
And that's a change in the last 6 months.
6 months, yeah.
Recently, he called police when there was trouble in the parking lot.
They came quickly.
They came very quick within, I think, 3 minutes.
As a Vietnamese American business owner, Dan is worried about the rise in hate incidents against Asians.
I am so worried about that because so many people walk by my office here and my office is wide open.
It's happened before, but the difference now, he feels like he has more support and hopes other minorities can feel the same.
Asian as a whole, we are very shy about talking to the police and reporting on some activity or some people because they're afraid of retaliation, if you will. So that's why we have to encourage them to come out and be active in your community.
Owning this business means everything to Dan.
You know, it's American dream.
That's why keeping it safe is his priority. In Arlington, I'm Tiffany Liu.